Let's get that set up. So there we are. We are now recording. Fab. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Featured Member. I am absolutely delighted to introduce the featured member for November. Switch this over so we can all see. This is Alison Bickers. Alison, welcome to Featured Member.
Thank you.
How are you this morning?
I'm good. Despite the weather, I'm good. Thank you.
Of all of the things that can slight the British attitude and excitement, it will always come down to the weather.
Absolutely.
I have found no matter what else is going on, it's always, despite the weather, or it could be this, it could be, it will always come down to the weather. So let's give people a chance to get to know a bit about you, and then I'll explain a bit about the featured member process. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more?
Okay, so I'm Alison Bickers, and I'm a psychotherapist based in Worthing, West Sussex, along the coast. And I've been practicing for 16 years now. I know, I don't look old enough.
No. At what point were colleges letting 7-year-olds in? What's going on there?
I know. But yeah, so practicing for quite a while now. And I probably, like most people, I wanted to be a counsellor because of my own experiences growing up. Difficult adolescence, and suffered with an eating disorder. Mm. And then in my mid-20s, I lost my dad to cancer. So for all of that, I'd had help with a therapist. I'd had CBT. I was an inpatient, and I'd had counselling. So I'd kind of done the whole lot, really.
Everything that could be thrown at you was really thrown at you, and all of the support mechanisms that, well, a lot of the support mechanisms that were available during that process of a period of time kind of were made available, which is not the experience for a lot of people.
Well, I remember that there was a lot of having to chase for that. I remember my mum having to force it, really. It wasn't easy, because back then that kind of thing wasn't recognised very easily. There weren't specialised departments for eating disorders at that time. It was just, you know, good luck with that. Let's see what we can get. So she did push for it.
Yeah, and it does. And I think in a lot of cases, even now, that fight with the systems to get the support is still in place, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially if, you know, you're not low enough for thinking about eating disorders specifically. If you're not a low enough weight, or your blood results are showing that they're okay, it doesn't really matter what's going on psychologically.
Yeah,
you just won't get the help.
Yeah, and it's almost that you have to be at beyond the point of effective help in order for help to start, which invariably gives low results. Which
you need early intervention.
Yeah,
really, but it doesn't happen very often.
And we'll touch on that in a moment. But let me kind of give people a bit of a glimpse into the featured member process, because a lot of organisations that do employee of the month or whatever will have targets that employees have to meet. Organisations can sometimes do their featured member or their employee of the month type system as a, names in the hat, let's pull somebody out. APA doesn't do that. APA takes a look at what members are actually doing, what is the journey that those members have been on, and let's showcase the experience and the skill sets of a particular member for a particular period. And when Siobhan and I sat down a couple of weeks ago and were looking at how are we going to end the year, what are going to be the focuses for the year, it was clear that the collaboration with the team at the National Centre for Eating Disorders has already come into play. What we wanted to do was make sure that there was a conversation with one of our members that has that experience, that has that understanding, not just of delivering support, but also of what the system is like, and bringing those two elements together. And that led us directly to you and the conversations that have already been had around eating disorders within APA as a general topic. So congratulations for the journey you've been on and being at the point that you've reached. And nobody expects that that's the journey end.
No.
And we are completely comfortable and confident that your journey is well and truly underway. 16 years in business and consistently supporting is not easy in the climate that we've experienced over that last decade and a half. So what do you enjoy most about what it is that you're doing?
That's a good question. I love helping people. I love being invited into their world. I feel completely humbled and honoured every time I'm sat across from someone and they're telling me their story and that they're trusting me in helping them with that. And there are days when I'm tired out, but most days I get to the end of my day and I think, I love my job.
That's a powerful moment to be in, isn't it?
Because not many people can say that they get to the end of the day and you just think, I absolutely love what I do. And I'm so, I say lucky, but I've worked hard for it.
Yeah. And the learning and everything that goes into the framework for what you do is a component part, isn't it? Yeah. Because in the moment, in that transition between the story being told, the processing, and then the supporting, there is so much more than just learning that comes to the fore. And every experience along the way contributes to that moment. Do you think that the wider world understands that it's more than just the learning?
I don't know. Probably not. I think that people don't realize that a lot of the therapeutic outcome is down to the rapport you have with your client. And I think one of the key things is being authentic as well. Because clients can sense when you're not being real.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so important, and which is why I was drawn really to APA, because of that part around self-awareness. Because if you're not really tuned into yourself, if you don't know what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what you're thinking, you can't truly be authentic and be with that client.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because one, it's always nice to hear what has kind of been part of that connection point for people coming on board, but it's also for me, when as kind of the APA architect, if you like, building the frameworks and then working with Siobhan to tailor those and frame them in the right way so they work for everybody, or as many people as is physically possible. We by no means expect that we're going to be able to support absolutely everybody, and not everybody will want to be supported. But one of the factors in that architectural building was this idea that we cannot pour from an empty cup. And that moment of support, when the story is shared, the learning kicks in, the experience kicks in, and then it's the rapport that allows that transition back to the client. But if that self-awareness isn't there, then quite often what bleeds back into the client is not just the learning, the rapport, and the experience in relation to the client, but everything else that that professional is carrying. And that can be counterproductive to the client. And it's that awareness of knowing how much to let come across. That I
you've
think
got to kind of have, and I think what a part of my journey, whatever you want to call it, in becoming the psychotherapist I am today was learning mindfulness, which was life-changing for me, really life-changing, because I was burning out and I was at my wit's end, and it was mindfulness that really kind of grounded me, I suppose. And now I'm much more aware of what goes through my mind, how I feel physically and emotionally. Most of the time, you know, there are times when not.
Yeah, we all have wobbles.
Of course, and there are times when I'm triggered for whatever reason, you know, in a relationship, when I'll just lose that awareness. But having that ability to tune in and sort of notice, what am I thinking about this client right now? What's going through my mind? What am I feeling in response to that client? Is so helpful. It's really good information.
Yeah, and giving yourself time to have that thought process.
Yeah,
is key, I think. And it's often joked about in the office that I did all of my psychological awareness backwards. Okay, so I got into mindfulness probably before it was even a concept of mindfulness, because of my martial arts training.
Yeah.
And I was being taught by very old, when I say old, I'm talking 70 years plus old, masters of ancient Japanese martial art. So I was getting all of these breathing, mindfulness, all of the things that make up what we know as mindfulness in a way that wasn't framed in that way. So I learned that from a very early age, without all of the, I have to do this in order to cope with things that would already happen.
So you already had it as a kind of philosophy in your life.
Yeah. So it was backwards. It wasn't a case of I had to go and learn because something happened.
Yeah.
It had already been built in. And I think that helped me when things did go wrong in a way that I couldn't actually kind of appreciate at the moment. And when things went wrong for me, yes, it's no secret. It took 2 years for me to get back onto a level kind of
it takes time, doesn't it?
But if I hadn't have had those skill sets, it would have taken me a lot.
I think there's a massive misconception about mindfulness at the moment as well. People see it as a way of relaxing, a way of calming, a way of being zen, and it's not that at all.
No.
It's about being aware of how you're feeling, even if that's horrible. You know, not judging it, not struggling with it,
and being comfortable in the uncomfortable moments.
Yeah.
And allowing the uncomfortable moments to become a point of reference. So as you move forward or you move away from the discomfort, you've got that point to go, actually, I'm not there. I've moved past that, or however that perception might work for an individual.
Yeah.
I think you're right. A lot of things within therapeutic arena, all of the learning and the concepts, the understanding, aren't always relayed to the public in a way that is beneficial for them, unless there is a financial gain for whatever that presentation is. And I think that does a huge
diluted, doesn't it?
It's a huge dilution. But when you think about the journey you've been on, and specifically if we can look at kind of the eating disorder experience, and I don't use disorder comfortably. It's not a comfortable word for me. Okay. It's a bit like saying stress is a disorder.
Yeah.
You know, stress is a natural factor within the brain's coping capacity to warn you that this isn't comfortable. That's not a disorder. That's your brain doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
How do you think the way you were supported in those moments on your journey has differed to the way support is done now?
Not a lot, probably. Okay, so very similar, I'd say. So I worked in the NHS eating disorders service as a psychological therapist for 6 months, and so I was in it as a therapist as well. And like I said earlier, you only get the help at the moment, and that's not the fault of anyone other than there just aren't the resources, but you only get the help if you are at the worst point, really. You've lost a lot of weight, you know, you're purging a lot and your blood results are all over the show, then you get the help. And that was the same back when I was supported. And then also you've got in primary care NHS, you can't be seen necessarily by a CBT therapist if you've got an eating disorder. So again, there's this, okay, I can't be seen there because I'm not bad enough. And I can't be seen here because they don't cover that thing. There's this huge gap.
Yeah. And that chasm is where we see a lot of people saying, because of that, I can't even reach out. There's no point in reaching out because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So things are pushed further and further down. And when it is a case of, okay, now it's this bad, it's at the tipping, it's gone past tipping point, long past tipping. We get to a point where it's like, well, the service just cannot get a positive outcome here.
No. And people do die. Now, I've had clients, thankfully not under my watch, that have later died from anorexia.
Yeah.
Which is really sad.
Yeah. And it's as I'm sure the team at the National Centre for Eating Disorders will say, it's totally preventable. It's about changing perception about the point of contact. And if we can change where the point of contact occurs, we can change the entire representation of how support is done without actually changing what support is done. We're changing when support is done.
Yeah, because I think actually, you know, the support you get when you're in the system is pretty good. You get the behavioural intervention, which is important, first of all, to get someone renourished so that their brain is functioning enough to do the therapy. That's really important.
Yeah. And it is literally where we're, you know, force bolting stable doors come to mind in the current kind of thought pattern. Do you think there is an argument that, as you said, the resources that are available are never going to be adequate? We know that. No. But there is almost a disregard for the external support that's available.
Yeah, but I do think that's changing a little bit because of the desperation at the moment. So obviously you've got, and this is another thing, isn't it? Because you've got private therapists, and there aren't that many private counsellors or psychotherapists that will work with eating disorders, especially in young people, because it's a very risky group of people to work with. Yeah,
it takes a very, very special mindset to go into that.
Yeah.
And as we heard in the hidden conversation on eating disorders with Bernie Ray, and if anybody hasn't seen that, please go check that out on the Hidden Conversations playlist. The training and the consciousness of eating disorders is just such a low priority, both in the medical field but also in the therapeutic field.
Yeah. And I was thinking about, you know, you saying what else is available. There is stuff available, but it costs, and not everyone can afford that.
Yeah. And this is where I think the roll on from what APA put out in the summer with the PTSD kind of scenarios for the NHS, that framework can be rolled out to extend to eating disorder. And the idea that you can have a reach out to self-employed, qualified, accredited therapeutic professionals that says they remain self-employed, they agree to the terms and conditions of disciplinary protections, everything else that the NHS already has in place, because ultimately whoever the NHS works with, they're going to be the protocols they use. No one else is. It doesn't matter whether you're employed by them or contracted to them. It's their policy. So you can sign up and be on their call list. And that allows for the clients to go through that call list and go, I want to work with that professional. And have that connection where you don't have to go through an NHS clinic. It can be completely confidential. It can be all of the things that we know practical best practice does. And that allows more therapeutic professionals to engage. We have to take off that bottleneck, don't we?
Is if you are working with someone with an eating disorder and they are at a low weight, or they're purging a lot, or they're taking laxatives a lot, I think it's, as a private practitioner, it's essential that you ensure that they are being physiologically checked by their GP or by someone on a regular basis, so that you get that back up.
Yeah, and we would always advise anybody who is working with a client that has any physical manifestations of any psychological or emotional impact, whatever it might be, reach out and work with that client to build the right team around them. One person is not going to be the solution, but it's the one person that can be the point of contact that makes that work for that individual.
Yeah, absolutely,
It's about the communication. It's about not being too proud for a medical professional to say, okay, we need to bring in a team here. We can't do this all on our own.
You can't do it on your own.
And the human condition is made up of those three core elements. And if we're only going to stick to, let's look at the physical, then you're always going to be having to fix the physical. Because you're not working with the other areas. And that's where I think for me, for Siobhan, for the whole team within APA, what we've tried to do is kind of open up those doors so that the collaboration can happen and the professionals can reach out to the wider sector and say, okay, look, this is a situation, let's work together to come to solutions.
And I do think that has started to improve, because there's this desperation that the NHS just can't handle it anymore. Especially at the moment.
It's talking about at the moment. How has 2020 been for you?
Don't ask. Not great.
Have you seen the parallel working? Because we're all parallel working now in a way that we've never had to before. We've never been in the same kind of global crisis as clients. Have you found that clients have started to almost reimagine the therapeutic work because they are now seeing that as a professional you are in a crisis environment?
I think I certainly noticed that at the start, back in March and April. My clients started to ask about me, am I okay? And again, I just think you've just got to be authentic and say, I'm struggling too, actually, but I'm okay to do my work. And as long as you are okay to do your work,
And this is where supervision and support systems really do kick in. Do you find, though, that there are a lot of clients that when the idea of you being in a crisis situation, when they get that, it kind of triggers an uptake in their engagement?
Well, what I think I experienced was more that there was a sense that they needed to be careful around what they told me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to have those conversations, you know, what's it like for you knowing that I'm going through this as well, that we are all going through this at the moment. And having that open conversation, I think, was enough to allow them to start to engage again.
Yeah.
Really.
And it's that congruence and empathy that the impact of the overall situation can impact on them.
Yeah.
And if it's not exposed, then it will be buried.
Totally.
Only,
yeah.
And can
and you'll
act
get
as
people counselling and not you know, not wanting to come because they can't talk because they're going to burden you. And so having that conversation really helps.
And when you're allowed, or the client feels that space is allowed, it's permitted, and it's comfortable for you to have the conversation, it does mean that they get more comfortable with having the conversation themselves.
Yeah.
And you know, we're always conscious that the confidence of the professional to have that conversation stems from their self-awareness that the conversation is there to be had. And it's brilliant to hear from so many of the APA members through Open Contact Thursdays and just in general conversation that confidence has really blossomed this year. As much as everyone says, don't ask me about 2020, it's horrible, I don't like it. Actually, what's come out is an upskill and a reconnection to that self-awareness that we haven't really seen, and we probably would never have been conscious of without 2020 being what it has been. Yeah. What would you say you would like to see happening moving forward? What for the overall mental health arena, first off?
For the overall mental health arena, I think, you know, I was thinking about this before our conversation, and men came into my mind because I still think there's a stigma around men having therapy. I'm quite fortunate because I practice cognitive behavioural therapy, and I think that does attract men because of its structure, and it feels a little bit more scientific.
Cost-based.
Sorry?
The idea of it's got a structural path, it's got you need to be conscious of this plays to the male psyche.
Yeah. Plays to my psyche as well, actually. I like to think like that. But so I do see quite a lot of men, and there is still that, not with everyone, but there's still a bit of shame around it, that it's weak, that I shouldn't be having therapy. I should be able to sort this out on my own. I shouldn't be having these emotions.
It always surprises me that perception for men is in play. And the reason why it first struck me as really strange was when I was doing some research, and I spent a lot of time with British special forces. And these are the elite. These are the guys who go into the shadows, do the job that they do, and come home. And yes, we know they have severe traumatic experiences. But when they are on operations, if something goes wrong for them as an individual within that team, they are the first ones to put their hands up and say, hey guys, I've sprained my ankle. Right? It can be as simple as that. But that sprained ankle can slow down the team from an 8-minute mile to a 12-minute mile. And that can totally jeopardize every single life that they have around them.
Yeah.
And it struck me that that sprain, that's the first trigger here that something's not right. And if the most elite men on the planet, and I do kind of acknowledge the teams that worked with me on that, so thank you very much to the teams at Hereford and at Poole, the guys that I think they're all retired now, so I can pretty the whole process of being able to say, guys, you need to know, we need to stop right now because I need to get a stone out of my boot in some cases.
Yeah.
If I don't get that stone out of my boot, that's going to break my ankle. And then we're all done. So when men understand that if the elite can do that, then there is a strength in saying, guys, I'm looking after you by making sure that I get this fixed.
Mm.
And that strength is something that I think, for me, moving forward on the issue of men and therapy and everything else, that's got to be the message. That it can be as simple as a psychological stone in your boot.
Absolutely. And, you know, staying with that metaphor or that story there, if it's an emotional or psychological stone, for example, it will be affecting their relationships, their marriage, their family, their friendships, their ability to enjoy life. So in a similar way that it affects the team that they're on, if there's a stone in the boot, they need to tell everyone and get it sorted. Or, yeah, it's maybe a good way of explaining it.
And I think, you know, as you say, there are processes, there are different kinds of approaches that can be put in play for somebody who reaches out. There is not one glove that fits all.
And I think that's another thing that needs to be recognised going forward in mental health, is that all modalities have their strengths and would suit different people. Yeah.
And I think for me, the biggest kind of switch, if I wave the magic wand, as it were, and go, you know, what can open the door here, is that the concept of CBT becomes used not as a solution, but as a doorway to the solution.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in my own mind, CBT, and I've said this pretty much the last 20 years, CBT was never about therapy. It's about understanding what therapy is going to work because of the cognitive behavior.
Yeah.
So it's almost like CBT is the lobby of the mental health unit. And of that lobby are all of the different therapy doors.
And the way I see it is, and this is probably, well, very much related to my experience, is that CBT can help with the symptom. So let's say someone's having frequent panic attacks. CBT is fantastic for helping with anxiety and panic attacks. So they're going through life having panic attacks. They're just constantly on the fight-flight mode. And CBT can help with that, but then it might be that they need some therapy to explore.
Yeah. And I think it's that, are we going to deal with the symptom, or are we going to deal with what's underneath the symptom? And for me, that would be my biggest wish, that moving forward and using 2020 as a year of opportunity to say, what works, let's move that into 2021. What doesn't work, let's leave in 2020.
And I don't know whether you've heard of it, acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a third wave version of CBT, which incorporates mindfulness, values, and rather than getting caught up in trying to change your thoughts, it's about being able to unhook from thought processes so that you can move forward. You're not caught up in worrying about something. You're not thinking about last week. You're kind of in the moment and choosing to act in a way that's valuable to you in your life.
And it's starting to bring together the component factors that allow somebody to rebalance, rather than let's focus on what the trauma is and try and deal with the trauma. Well, if you haven't got the coping strategies, the coping skills, the connective of all of those other building blocks, then that seesaw is always going to be heavier on the trauma. And it's about rebalancing that by giving somebody, and it's an analogy that I use for our Bitimo program with the ex-military. A lot of therapy has been frameworks that have been put in place and systems. You've been, one end of the seesaw has been smacked with trauma, this massive weight, and you've been thrown off the seesaw at the other end, and you're I don't know what.
No sense of what direction you're moving in, or
because you're in orbit now, and there's no direction, there's no up down. It's complete chaos for a lot of people. And our systems say, well, we've got to deal with that box. Let's just focus on that box, and then we can deal with it. But if you're up in orbit, you've got no traction. That box is just going to stay there, and you can be pushing and pushing and pushing, and you will feel like you're making progress, but the box isn't going anywhere. So as the development and the understanding has grown over the last 5-6 years, we're now starting to say, right, okay, let's put this box onto your side of the seesaw. Let's bring this component in, bring this in, bring this in. We weight this up. So now we've got a balance, and it's easier then to push that box off of your seesaw. You've still got all of those coping skills and those learned experiences and lived experiences. But the next time something comes down on that side, you've already got the weight here to cope with that. And it's for life. It's not something that you forget once you've dealt with the trauma. And that, I think, is, again, something that the whole mental health arena has got caught up in, focusing on mental health as something that happens to you. Mental health is a constant.
Well, people don't think of physical health like that, do they? You go to the gym every week, you go for your run, whatever you do to keep fit, if you do. But you don't sort of say, oh, I'll only do it when my leg's falling off, or
and this is why the idea of the mental health boot camp came up during the summer. So people will do absolutely anything. They will invest an hour a day for years on their physical, but they won't spend an hour a day on their psychological or their emotional. So, which is why we
I'm sure we're both guilty of that as well.
Oh yeah, because we're human. Because we focus, and we're conditioned to focus. Our environment conditions us to focus on the doing rather than the being. How to do.
Or the being,
as you say. So we, APA have put together the Bootcamp 21, which is 21 hours, 1 hour a day for 21 days. And from what we can work out, it's the first focused mental health program of its type. So we're actually saying, here is something to focus on today. Tomorrow we focus on something else, etc. And we go through 21 different elements. And all of the elements that we focus on are components that you are building up your own resiliences and your own awarenesses of. So as you go through, you are building your own kind of coping system, but also the support system for other people.
Great
and
idea.
We're really looking forward to putting that out next month, 1 hour a day. But I think it kind of ties back to some of the things that you've said this morning, that we don't look at the component parts. We look at the big thing and we go, well, we haven't got enough resources for that big thing. because we've waited for it to be so big, we can't compete with it.
Yeah.
And then the outcomes are not as successful as if we dealt with it.
Yeah.
And catastrophe for far too many people.
Yeah.
But that's just one, some ideas there of how you and I would like to see mental health kind of move forward and reconnect and kind of almost a remessaging, that mental health isn't something that happens to you. It's something that is with you, and it's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
And what happens around us moves that position on the scale.
Yeah. Just in the same way you can have terrible physical health because you've not looked after your body. You can have great mental health if you spend time on that.
Yeah. And I think that's a brilliant kind of point to leave that kind of topic. So just before we close, you mentioned congruence being one of the things that drew you to APA and the self-awareness. Making that transition and kind of going, okay, this is new. This is a new approach. This is a new organisation.
Yeah.
You've been a member almost a year. Just over,
I reckon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your feeling having had the experience of having had time with the organisation?
It feels very warm and welcoming and personable. The Facebook group is, it's quite free to sort of express what you want, and as long as it's obviously respectful to everyone. You and Bonnie are approachable, so if we need anything, we can contact you. And it's growing, isn't it? So it's nice to be involved in something that's new and developing.
Thank you so much, because it's everything. Even before we went public, that was the hopes, that was the kind of the sentiment, if you like, that we wanted to weave into the DNA of the organisation. Being approachable is something that I think the entire mental health field has not had. It's almost like professionals are very, very isolated in private practice, but also if they're employed, their mental health is so vital that being employed and being in part of a bigger system isn't always beneficial to their mental health.
Well, sometimes harder, because you're expected to
perform
certain
anyway.
Outcomes and certain number of clients, and
and one of the things that we've seen within organisations is the safeguards on hours and engagement with clients goes out the window.
Oh yeah.
It's we've got our back against the wall. We need a 38-hour week out of everybody that's working in this world. Yeah. If you really want 38 hours of interaction that's going to be positive, then you best have about 2 or 3 people available to cover those 38 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Because one person is not wearing a cape with an S under their shirt.
Yeah.
It's,
And people, I'm focusing again on the NHS, but people are leaving the NHS in the droves because it's just not sustainable to work like that. So yeah, it's great to have a group of people where it feels supportive and warm.
And I'm delighted that we are able to offer that. And I've always said APA is a service, not a business. And our focus will always be on serving the members, but also expressing to the wider community that this is service. We are there to serve our clients, whether we are employed by a business. The person that is sat in front of that individual professional still their client.
Yeah.
And it's that service to the client that has to be paramount.
Yeah.
Cannot do that if the professional is feeling stressed, is feeling unsupported, invalidated, disengaged. It just becomes robotic, dramatic, and we know that leads to failure. We've even, 2019, people were saying there's a mental health crisis in the UK. What do we think we've got now?
Yeah, it's not going to be good, is it? I mean, it's not good now, but goodness knows what it's going to be like next year.
Yeah.
It's scary.
So I want to say a massive thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I want to say a massive congratulations again for the path that you have already walked so beautifully and with such grace at times, and the compassion for yourself and those around you to be able to say, do you know what, I need to recharge my batteries, is just as important as the decision to say, okay, I'm ready to go into a session with a client.
Yeah, which is why I'm taking a week off.
And why we're able to get the time. So on your week off, I am absolutely delighted that we've been able to grab some time. For anybody that has watched the conversation, I hope you've enjoyed getting to know Alison a bit better. I hope you've been able to gain some learning from the conversation itself. And if you have, then on the description, you'll have the link to the CPD questionnaire, and you can send that in and get validation for that CPD certificate for what you've learned. No one gets a CPD certificate from APA without that validation, even members. So we're not just handing out paperwork like confetti. It's about making sure that the public have faith and trust that when someone says they've done CPD hours with APA, they know that that's been validated. They've not just gone and read a book or what they've gained something from it. So, Alison, for now, I look forward to the next time we have a conversation. I am pretty sure that the team will be sending out an invite to you for one of the panel conversations on eating disorders for the new year. But for now, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and we'll see you on another episode very soon.